Ayahuasca, or jahe as it's known here in Colombia. It's a psychedelic plant that comes from the Amazon. A dark brown liquid, it's just a mixture of two completely natural plants. It's not the nicest tasting. You drink it and then you sort of wait, usually half an hour to an hour. Things change colours, you have visions, some very abstract, some very real, looking back into your past that helps you see and understand things in whole different ways. Sort of rewires your brain, all the synapses, and have very strict paths that we've developed over years. And this kind of just gives a fresh dump of snow on a ski slope, if you imagine. So then there's new places where you can ski where before all the turns were already carved out.
Today, I have my former colleague Tom, who I worked with for 5 years, who is now a trainee ayahuasca shaman. He's bought a plot of land in Colombia, and he's been going to talk about how he went from gambling and alcohol to taking ayahuasca and doing things like semen retention, which is essentially not ejaculating, not masturbating. It's a really interesting topic today. Tom, you know about this concept of the cosmic bridge because we've talked about it a lot of times, the two of us. So for you, what is your cosmic bridge?
It's the key pillar for my bridge comes through ayahuasca, or jahe as it's known here in Colombia. So for those who don't know what that is, it's a psychedelic plant that comes from the Amazon. It's been used for thousands and thousands of years. It's actually a mixture of a root cooked with a leaf from two completely natural organic plants. Traditionally, it was actually used as a anti-parasite, and the psychedelic effects were the secondary. But actually, from the last 1,000 or so years, it's kind of turned. So the psychedelic effects being the more healing plant, and the anti-parasite coming with it too. There's a lot of snakes, worms, or whatever in the parasite to clear. So it's very difficult to explain on a podcast exactly what happens and how it is. Mikey, I know you have experience with ayahuasca as well, so feel free to add anything. But it sort of rewires your brain into, you have visions, some very abstract, that make little sense, but after the journey you can kind of tie together, and some very real, looking back into your past that helps you see and understand things in whole different ways. So I don't know what you have to add to that, Mikey.
Yeah, well, what I thought, obviously, I've taken ayahuasca, right? So I kind of know about it, but the majority of people out there haven't taken it. So I thought we could kind of go into, maybe we talk about like your first ceremony and the reasons you went to your first ceremony, and like what you'd heard about ayahuasca that drove that decision.
Yeah. So the first ceremony was a weird one because a lot of people kind of come to this thinking people only do these things if they really need help and need some tragic or huge kind of monumental shifts in their life. My first ceremony, going back many years, I used to drink a lot and gamble a lot, in a bad way, like far too much. But I managed to stop that. And then for 5 years, I lived in Brazil, I lived in Colombia, worked in the UK, kind of got my life on the straight and narrow. I was actually working with you at the time. You were a big influence to why I first directed towards ayahuasca. And there was nothing inherently like wrong with my life. It was just, I'm always somebody, anyone who knows me would know that I kind of push for more and think that there must be more to life than this, different answers, different ways. And it kind of came to me 2 weeks beforehand. I'd been terrified of it for a long time. And I was hiking up in the mountains of Medellin with friends, with a dog, eating food, enjoying life. But I just felt something was missing. Like, there must be more, I was just tired. I didn't have that spark. And then I remembered the conversations I've had with you, that I've had with other friends. And I thought, I have to try this plant. I've just got to give it a go. And most people jump in for one night, but I'm kind of extreme. I went to a 6-day retreat 5 ayahuasca ceremonies, 3 Cambo ceremonies, which is like a detox cleanse in itself. I won't touch on that here. We've already got too much to talk about with the ayahuasca, but the first ceremony, very light, some colours, feeling some love, but nothing too crazy for me. And that's
Just
quite common in the first ceremony.
Yeah,
Go on.
sorry, just to stop you there. So, in terms of the first ceremony, how does it work? It's something you drink, and like tell us about that first
Yeah,
ceremony. So you're like you're drinking this thing. Like, how does it taste? What's the process in that first ceremony?
yeah. So we start with the cleaning, the sort of detox with the Cambo. The cleaner the body, the more easy it is to work with a psychedelic plant. And then throughout the day, we kind of talk about why we're here, how we discovered, how we ended up at this place. There's the shaman and his wife. The shaman's sort of the ceremony leader. His wife's a trained psychotherapist, incredible woman, been working with this many years. So actually talk with her about, why we're here, what we're looking for, some of the issues we're facing, some of the great things that are all happening in life. And then comes to the ceremony, starts about 7 p.m. at night, and it's drunk. I guess a shot's the easiest way to describe it. It's sort of a dark brown liquid. It's just a mixture of 2 completely natural plants. One is the DMT, that's the psychoactive substance. DMT we already have in our body. It's sort of when people talk about that bright white light when you have a near-death experience, or what happens when you're born and you die. That is an extreme shot of DMT. So the chacruna leaf has the DMT in it. And what the ayahuasca means the vine of death in Quechua. It's the oldest indigenous language still used. What that does is actually block the body's enzymes to digest the DMT of the chacruna leaf. So you drink this substance, this medicine. It's not the nicest tasting thing you'll ever have, for sure. You definitely get used to it. It's a lot easier now than it was before. You drink this and then you sort of lie on a mat, very tranquil, very well protected environment, fire, candles, many other things, incense burning to keep the place clean, quiet, all under control. What we're not talking about here is sort of go out with your mates on a Friday night to the forest and just sort of go and trip. We're talking a very controlled, very disciplined way of using these substances. You drink it and then you sort of wait, usually half an hour to an hour. And then what happens, as I mentioned, it's initially an anti-parasite. You often throw up because of that. That's very common when you start doing it. And when you throw up, when the body's cleaning and also your body's digesting the DMT, that's when you begin to see some of the psychedelic effects. So I mean, it's very difficult to explain, but things change colors. You start to see memories that you didn't even know you had from your childhood. You start to see abstract things like snakes and pits, and you can come after the ceremony and speaking with people who understand this, sort of tie it back to some of the great things that happen in your life, but also some of the traumas that you've had from before, to begin to dive in and kind of heal and change that. And what the scientific effect on the brain is similar to magic mushrooms. If anyone's seen Fantastic Fungi on Netflix, it's rewiring all the brain, all the synapses, and have very strict paths that we've developed over years. And this kind of just gives a fresh dump of snow on a ski slope, if you imagine. So then there's new places where you can ski where before all the turns were already carved out. So hopefully that helps to break it down a little more.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to add something around the preparation as well, having done it myself. So I haven't done it as many times as Tom, but I've done it. I've done a couple of ceremonies, and essentially, Tom mentioned something there around like the detoxing beforehand. The other thing you have to do as well is for 2 weeks before, you can't drink alcohol, you can't take any, recreational drugs, cocaine, anything like that, marijuana. You can't eat red meat as well. So you really have to, your body has to be in a good state. And going back to what Tom said, this isn't like going out with your friends and taking a recreational drug. This is a medicine, right? That is very healing. And it's been used for thousands of years by indigenous people in South America where Tom lives. So all right, let's talk around. I think you mentioned when you did the first ceremony, you did 6 nights, right? And the second night was like stronger than the first night. So what kind of healing process did you go through on that second night?
Yeah, that second night was probably one of the most mental of my life. I mean, to try and describe it with words, a shaman's wife always says the spiritual world can't be described with human words, but I'll do my best shot. I was like inside my mother's womb, but in a very abstract way. But I can just remember it exactly, kind of swirling round and being here. And then I came out the womb into the world. I don't know how long this process was going on for. And then it was sort of like my whole childhood relived. I was like a baby curled up in the fetal position on the mat. Then I began to kind of sit up. And then it's a beautiful house, a beautiful garden there. So I began to kind of stand up and begin to take my first steps and sort of relive many of those childhood memories that I had and seeing some of the failings. I remember an incident in school when I was young and stole some orange juice off somebody. Just took it from my neighbor. It caused a big incident. I had to go see the headmaster. I was crying, but weird details like that I'd almost forgotten about, just reliving until I was back, kind of sat on my mat. And they're incredible musicians who sing a very kind of style of mantras and music of love, and then you're kind of listening to this kind of transcend through your body at the same time. There's actually somebody from London called Isla Schaefer, very famous medicine musician, and it was just through that I didn't understand exactly what had gone on with that whole experience through the womb. I spoke to the shaman's wife the next day about it all, and it's just reliving and kind of healing parts of your childhood and parts of your adult life that you just didn't know that were there anymore. And, going into the third and fourth ceremonies as well, incredibly difficult. And why I say this is done in a very controlled way, because on those third and fourth nights, I had to ask for help. You still do know you're there. They're right behind you. It's all, when done in the right way, it's completely controlled and completely safe, but it can be very scary, some of the visions you see with I don't know, snakes and fires and black holes and whatever else appears. But it's almost in those scary moments that you just learn to let go and trust yourself and trust that you have everything you need to get through those moments, and then you can take that back into your life when you have difficult moments and just have that confidence that you are divine, you are God. Or if you don't like, the word God, energy, spirit, whatever you want, we all are. All the plants, all the universe, every single one of us. And, that's another massive thing I got. Maybe we'll touch on this more later, but I was a massive atheist. I didn't believe in anything. Now I believe in everything. I'm not religious. I don't have any set Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever else. But I believe in the divine. I believe in the power of God. Jesus, Muhammad, Shiva, Ganesh, wherever you want to go.
So what I wanted to talk to you about, that's obviously one of the things there. You've got more what I'd call faith, right? Believing in something that connects us all, a divine presence. I've had conversations with you. So fast forwarding, and we'll talk about that later. Tom is now doing his own ceremonies on his own journey as an ayahuasca shaman. But you talked about how many people will come to your or go to ceremonies in general. And then, the next weekend they're like drinking with, girls or boys or whatever it is. And then they haven't really integrated what they've learned in ayahuasca. So I guess going to that point, how did you incorporate all of these weird visions of snakes and pits and childhood traumas, etc., into your like daily life in what we'd call the material world? Because that's one of the things we're trying to talk about on this podcast is you can have spiritual experiences, but how is that affecting you in a positive way in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I have, as you touched on, many people, not many, it's still a minority, but it is a sizable minority who speak about the love and existence they find and then just make zero changes in their lives and go back to, sort of dark ways and ways that they know aren't right. I have very good people around me. The shaman's wife, I should start calling her by her name, Sabina, very good at helping to kind of explain and translate some of these crazy experiences into the more material world. I'm also being quite disciplined, as you know. I used to have quite a kind of weird... We've known each other for many years, drinking and gambling a lot and many other things like that. And, I was fortunate to learn the discipline to leave that behind a few years ago. So taking that discipline into the lessons I've learned, starting to, more eat better, eat more organic, healthy, local food, just sort of the basics that add up, exercise better, change who I was hanging out with, change what I was doing, and help to, everyone has their different journey. And, I don't think ayahuasca's for everyone. Some people have meditation, yoga, breath work, this or that, but begin to actually be more honest and direct with some of the people around me to help guide them to whatever their cosmic bridge is. And really just in the way you live every second of life, connecting back to that presence, the food we eat, the stuff we drink, the exercise we do, sleeping more, more active meditation, breath work, many different things. And but mostly the people I was hanging around, very good people, very good guides. And, my shaman isn't the most typical shaman you'd imagine. Very direct, speaks his words, doesn't sort of, many people have the white and the feathers and the teeth. And that's great. Like, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but more just somebody, who I could talk with in an incredibly direct way about anything and not always agree, but just, be direct, honest, open about whatever's going on.
I know one of the things that happened to you after ayahuasca was you got very deep into this journey with semen retention. And I know obviously your partner who you're with now, you met through ayahuasca. So the a big pillar in both your relationship and then that act. So some people won't know what semen retention is. So I thought we could start with you explaining what semen retention is and then about how like ayahuasca kind of helps you in that journey.
Yeah, I love this topic because it almost feels like something that nobody's ever talked about. And I'm talking in the last part about the people I hang out with. And it just took me to lots of weird and different places and different people to the point where people were really talking about sex in such an open way, how it should be talked about, but in a different way to how, I'd always talked about it before, go out on a Friday night, meet someone, tell your mates over a full English the next day when you're a bit hungover, to actually speaking about the much deeper spiritual side of sex. And then that got on to semen retention. There's two books. That one is great, is The Tao of Loving. Another's by David Dada. I forget the name, but Google David Dada, you'll find it. But also talking with these people, and semen retention is essentially not ejaculating. And we're talking about through masturbation and during sex. And there are ways to have orgasms without ejaculation. And really, as it comes from ancient Chinese and Japanese practices, where your semen is the seed of life. So the more you're spraying your seed around, the more you're diminishing your kind of power and energy in life. So I started experimenting a lot around with this. At the time, I didn't have a girlfriend, but like many men, I was masturbating a lot. I used to also watch a lot of porn. I have never watched porn again. Haven't done in a long time. But also no longer masturbating to control that energy to take it elsewhere. And then I met my girlfriend, who's now my wife. It's actually our 2-year anniversary today. So I met her through the ayahuasca journey, also on this spiritual path similar to me again. And we've been practicing this a lot during sex, different breathing techniques, always breathing through the nose, different ways of using the muscles within the penis and other parts of the body to help circulate this sexual energy to A, last much longer, which is obviously beneficial for the other partner, but B, to just not have this explosion of sexual energy. And then afterwards, we all know after sex you can be quite like drained, tired, irritable, but actually keep that in and not ejaculate. Not always, it's still fun every now and then for sure. But I'm doing it less and less, not because I'm restricting anything, just because I don't want to. Because I enjoy the energy that just keeps flowing and flowing throughout the day and throughout the weeks that go afterwards. So, yeah, maybe a new concept to a lot of people listening, but it's something that I really recommend looking into.
Yeah, 100%. It's something I've done as well. And to kind of back up what Tom is saying is you feel a lot more energy. And it's quite remarkable when you first do it. You're like, wow, I didn't know that there was this technique I could use to have lots of energy, because as Tom said, your seed is essentially what gives life, right? So keeping that energy inside you in your day-to-day life, it's going to give you a lot more energy. So I wanted to come to your journey now as what I'd call, I guess, like a trainee shaman. You've bought a large plot of land in Colombia where you're going to have retreats amongst many other things. So what happened between, like, how did it go from, taking ayahuasca once at a ceremony to now like wanting to actually, show the power of ayahuasca to other people? Like, what happened in that middle part?
So sometimes I still ask myself this same question and wonder how I ended up here. I just loved it. I really connected with the people there. So I kind of went back to a few ceremonies here or there. I never had any plans of becoming or training to be a shaman, so to speak. But I just got more and more connected with it and just found that this was my path and this was my way of being. Renato, the shaman, his wife became two very good friends of mine. Their spiritual daughter, so not by blood, but she had lived with them and supported them a long time. We, after about 10 months, then started dating. And she obviously works there, so then I'm a bit more intertwined with this all. And I just saw so many times the results people were having. We're talking the results across a full spectrum of suicidal people flipping their life round in one instance, to sort of more normal business people, married, who have everything tied together, being like, wow, discovering another key to life. And it was just so powerful. And I realized the way I was living my life in a very disciplined way, helping a lot of people, this is what I want to do too. This is what I can do. So, with that, I started helping out a lot more of the ceremonies. Sort of not during the most difficult parts that needs somebody really experienced, but, sort of putting the wood on the fire, cleaning the buckets afterwards, as I say, people throw up, stuff like that. And then just more and more diving into it to the stage now where we're, a few years on, and I'm doing very small ceremonies with people I know myself, helping them. It's a very difficult path. It's really not, sort of, to use a cliche, hippies tripping at Woodstock. It's it's incredibly difficult. There's a lot of energies you're working with. People have some quite tough experiences. You have to be there and present the whole time. You can't just let people go off, or they could be traumatized, or get lost in the woods somewhere. You have to be there with them. So that's sort of how I became on the ayahuasca path. And then recently with Renato, we've just bought a huge piece of land called Yaco Madre in the middle of absolutely nowhere. 300 hectares, 800 acres. The plan's to make the biggest natural reserve in Colombia. We've already planted 2,700 trees. We're protecting, we're not touching any rainforest that's there. It's all being cut down everywhere by the locals. I don't blame them, it's their way of life. It's how they've always known. It's our job to go there and provide more sustainable and beneficial alternatives. But to protect the nature that's there and regrow it is a key goal of ours. The biggest natural reserve in Colombia is our plan. Also host the retreats there, so really away from energy of typical life, purely in nature and peace and tranquility, where you can just really connect with yourself and grow. And we're going to have martial arts, yoga, hiking, many other things. We don't just want it to be tied to ayahuasca, because there are many different paths. I'm biased. To me, the most powerful is ayahuasca, but that's because what I do. I know for other people, they have their own journeys. So I never kind of want to evangelical preach about that. But yeah, just to open up all the opportunities for the nature to thrive and for people to thrive at the same time. That's the goal.
I wanted to chuck a couple of play devil's advocate here and again. These aren't things that I think, having done it and being exposed to it, but someone maybe listening, especially when you talk about psychedelic, they may just be like, oh, this is a druggy thing. This is some druggy cult where they're just taking this psychedelic around a fire. What would you say to people who are thinking that listening to this?
Well, I think you've got quite a good example in me, and Mikey can back this up with the discipline I have. You're talking teetotal for 5 or 6 years. No gambling, no smoking, no nothing. Living a mostly vegan diet, organic wherever I can, and treating my body with the most love and respect that at the time I knew how. So I'm not somebody who was going out and, every Friday and Saturday night, using whatever substance there was. I came to this purely thinking about the medicinal, beneficial side of things for my body, but for my mind. But speaking about it in a more general term, away from myself, it's done in controlled environments. We're not talking about people screaming and shouting and, whatever, hooking up and getting together on their mats. It's done, the music's all tied in with the ceremony, the setting, the environment. There are scientific studies everywhere, more into mushrooms than ayahuasca, I have to say. Fantastic fungi. Watch the documentary on Netflix. It kind of begins to explain how it helps to rewire the brain. There's nothing addictive to it. It's actually a body-owned substance. A carrot has DMT. A lettuce has DMT, admittedly in minuscule amounts, but so we're not applying anything new to the body that's not already there. And it really comes down to that. I think some people essentially do still use it when not done in the right way to go and have some crazy mad trip, and I know I've heard stories, I'm sure you have too, of shaman doing it in the wrong way, how it's not designed. But going back to the indigenous roots as well, this is something that these people throughout the Amazon, all different tribes, have been using for thousands and thousands of years. And they're the ones who live in the most circular environment. And I'm not going to say it's some form of utopia. They have challenges too. But the most circular environment you can ever imagine. Respect for nature. Respect for women. Respect for humankind. Respect for the rainforest and everything else. And, that's where it comes from, that level of respect and that level of love. So, though I get it, I know I receive those criticisms. I know when I go to the UK, some people don't truly understand what I'm doing. It's fine. I say my side of the story and don't try and convince otherwise. I understand it. But I'd say it's ayahuasca's for you if you're open to it and believe in it. If you think you're coming to take a drug and you're not open to it, best stay away from it.
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, if you are, Tom said this multiple times already, but if you are looking to go trip or like see it like you're going to a rave to get high or like go like, go and have a crazy night with your friends, that's not the point of ayahuasca. It takes you to some very dark places. I can just say in the two ceremonies that I've done, and I think what it taught me was looking at my own inner darkness. And like Tom says, some people have very bad traumas, but everyone has some type of traumas, and dealing with those and bringing them to light and dealing with them rather than hiding them deep in your subconscious. I think for me, it was realizing some of my own inner darkness and integrating that. Carl Jung calls that concept the shadow, and it certainly helped me integrate my shadow more. And it's something I'm working on a daily basis. And another thing I wanted to ask you, Tom, is around. Obviously, I know your shaman is a Swiss guy, right? A European guy, and obviously you're British, like myself. So I know some people have a thing like, oh, my shaman should be South American because ayahuasca comes from the Amazons, right? So a shaman should be from the Amazons. He's got hundreds of years practice doing this. I guess to start with, why did you choose, Renato, who's a Swiss guy versus a different type of shaman?
That's a good one. A big reason was because I was very nervous and scared about this. And at the time, though my Spanish was pretty good, it wasn't perfect. And therefore, if I had tough moments, I knew he speaks fluent English. I wanted to be able to communicate in English. And I do know some indigenous shaman who don't actually speak Spanish as well. They speak their indigenous language. So I kind of wanted that communication barrier. I also liked the fact that I'm near Medellin. They did very small groups. At the time, 6 people. Now a little more, but there's also some ceremonies that have 150 people there. So if you're having a really hard moment, it's, and there are still great places that do that, but it's more difficult. And, I've always kind of had the belief, and I still do, that it doesn't matter where you're from. He always says a phrase, the ayahuasca doesn't recognize Swiss, Colombian, indigenous, English. The ayahuasca only recognizes love. And you do this with love, that's all that really matters. I spoke with him, I had a good feeling. He didn't speak so much spiritual language. I spoke just more direct how I spoke, and I really like that. And there are advantages in everything. His shaman, his masters, lives near the Amazon, has generations of families doing this. He's a master shaman there, so there still is that kind of descendancy there. But I just felt good with it, and from my experience now, I've seen indigenous people, Colombian people, British people. And if you're prepared to open up and go through the experience, you'll have an amazing time, and there's love there. If you're not, you won't. And I see no correlation between where you're from and how that experience translates.
For sure. What was the quote you said earlier by Renato's wife around the spiritual can't be explained, something along those lines?
The spiritual world can't be explained with human language.
Spiritual world can't be explained with human language. Yeah, I like that, and I guess it goes into your point, right? That it doesn't matter where the shaman comes from, as long as there's that love there and doing it for the right purpose and trying to heal people. So on that note, I wanted to ask, you've been in lots of these ceremonies now. You've talked about your own story. What's with someone else? You mentioned a couple of examples like people that were suicidal, but kind of getting into details. Is there anyone that's come to one of the ceremonies and you've seen them like walk out and do like, incredible things in their life afterwards? Any stories that you've got to tell?
There's one just from the last ceremony I was in that I just love, a American Cuban guy came full from the pandemic, and I think a lot of people were, had really tough moments with some of the lockdowns, became a full-on alcoholic basically. There's an incredible testimonial with him talking about his experience online, but came full-on alcoholic, had done the therapies, had done the meditation, had done the yoga, things that may have worked for other people. Nothing would work for him. He didn't know what to do or where to go, and he somehow came across this weird plant, and he just didn't know where else to turn. Thought he would give it a go, and came here. And the retreats are now four ayahuasca ceremonies, and just on the third, just could see the root of where all his problems were coming from. Just finished the ceremony, no more. Like, I just decided in that moment, I'm healed, I'm good. Not I'm an alcoholic for life, just I'm no longer using alcohol. In that second. And he's great now. I know he's still like that, because I know it's easy to say straight after these experiences, like, I've changed everything. What happens when you go back into your world? But no. So admittedly, it's not somebody who's come and changed the world, but he's changed himself. He has a wife, he has kids, and now those wife and kids get to live with his father again, who no longer has an alcohol problem. I mean, that is changing the world in its own small way. So, and I've seen loads of these suicidal people, depressed people now running their own breath work and respiration retreats and doing all kinds of work. I've seen somebody who got told they were going to be in a wheelchair from multiple sclerosis in 2 years. He's now 8 years on in Germany working with Chinese medicine. He was working in construction before, completely fine. Brilliant, better than ever. And he was told there was no way that was going to be possible. So I've seen too many miracles to really say here, but that gives two in 1 second.
So what I wanted to do, because you've been on your own journey, right, which is a very spiritual journey, and you're actually going to be, you said you already started running ceremonies, you're going to go more in this direction, you bought land, you're kind of going to almost have this spiritual retreat in addition to ayahuasca, meditation and other things as well. But say someone like myself, right, that you go and do a ceremony, but then how do I incorporate this into a more like materialistic world? Like, I'm living in London, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this live in cities, right? What advice would you give to people who do ceremonies so that they can take away those learnings of what they learn from the plant and the spiritual world into their material life?
The most important thing is, I say, have good guidance. Sabina is just a trained, phenomenal therapist in this kind of work. The shaman would be a great person to go to after a ceremony if you didn't understand or you felt something, to kind of try and pull what you see up here in the spiritual world down into the material world. The others, what's going to happen during these ceremonies is you're going to see things about yourself that you want to change and that you don't like. You're going to see some things that you love and you want to amplify as well. So take those things, note them down, even write them down and go home. And one thing we always say to people when they get home, change your house round a little, just so there's like a new, just so everything's not the same, because often what can happen is you go straight back into the same environment, the same people. If one of your things is I want to stop drinking, and all your friends are going to the pub every Friday night, well, it's probably not going to be beneficial to your process to then go to the pub and try and drink orange juice or whatever, because after a while, those temptations may come back. So I'm not just saying, like, cut your friends off. Of course not. What you'll probably discover is that some of your friends aren't really, like, looking out for your best interests, and maybe you will change some things. But yeah, just make changes that you see are going to benefit you. If that means getting up earlier, that means stop drinking, eating Cocoa Pops for the morning because they contain like 50 grams of sugar. like even things as simple as that, just do the work, take the discipline in. And, I have a little altar through there. And, I just it reminds me, and I say altar, it's just got like a cloth on it, a few stones, an eagle, couple of instruments, little things like that connect you back to the old experience and what happened during the experience. And, I now train in martial arts, actually. I play the guitar, I have about 15 different instruments in this house. I love it. I was never a musician and I never trained in martial arts. So, yeah, just things that help me, like punching and boxing, just come back down to earth, clear the anger and just smile. And I love my life. I think few people in this world live better than me. Maybe sounds a bit arrogant, but, I love what I do.
No, I love you found the inner peace, and I loved what you said around like a small thing like changing your house slightly. It's going to remind you of, oh, why did I change my house? Because I went to that ceremony, and it reminds me of a book I'm reading called Atomic Habits by James Clear, which talks around those small changes that can have a big impact on you. Tom, I know you're not on most social media these days. I think we could probably do another podcast around that. But if people do want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, probably through this big land project. I almost have no personal, but I'm on, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, if anyone wants to reach out there, but no personal social channels. So through the big land project, it's called Yaku Madre, YACUMADRE.com. And through that, you'll find any email you send to that will come to me. We have the social channels through that. That'll also come to me. And check it out too. There's the YouTube channel for Yaku Madre as well that shows exactly what we're doing. So yeah, please, like any support, even subscribing to the channel, giving us a like. It all really helps to spread the message of what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today, Tom, and sharing your experience with us. Really interesting show today. The main thing that I learned was those small habits, right? That when you go through this big spiritual experience, in Tom's case, these ayahuasca ceremonies, how can you take that into your material world and into your job and your daily life? And Tom made a great point. Change your house, right? So if you have a really big learning from something, make sure you continue that into the future by doing small things like changing your house. And subscribe to us on all the podcast channels, whichever one is your favorite, and also on YouTube, and see you on the next episode of The Cosmic Bridge.